Welcome back to the Pittsburgh Basketball Show. I'm your host, George Michalowski with PSN. Today it's all me. No guest on today. We've had 18 great guests on so far, I believe. 3 NBA players, 6 active college basketball players in the city, 4 or 5 media members slash scouts, and a couple high school recruits. It's been a great time so far, but today we've got Pitt basketball news with OMARI Witherspoon announcing that Pitt made his top schools list. I know it's getting kind of hectic right now in the recruiting world. It's top school season. A lot of recruits putting out their lists, narrowing down their recruitment, taking some visits this fall, lining everything up, going into their senior seasons. Pitt's clearly going for guards in the class of 2025. I think they're comfortable with the future of their front court. Papa Conte, the twins, obviously anticipate they'll be back next year, and then Cam Corrin as well as Amdi for the future. So they seem comfortable. The program seems comfortable with where its front court future stands right now. We're not seeing as many forwards in the class of 2025 talking about Pitt, but we do have plenty of guards. We've got 5 different guards in the class with Pitt in their top schools list. Now, none of these have gone below 7. There's no top 5s. There's no top 3s just yet. So you got to be a little cautious. You got to take your time with these and not rush to conclusions and think and assume that Pitt's going to get any of these guys 100% for sure. With the portal, there's always the opportunity to miss on high school guys. As rough, as bad as it sounds, it's the reality of this day and age of college basketball where if Pitt didn't get any of these 5, obviously that wouldn't be a good thing. They're going after these 5. They're spending time. They're spending money. They're building great relationships with these players, going down to Peach Jam to see a lot of them, flying around the South, around the East Coast to see these guys, hosting them on visits, everything. So you want to land a high school future with these prospects, these 5 guys. But in addition, actually, before I go on, in addition, Isaiah Dennis and Derek Dixon aren't even a part of this group. So really looking at 5 to 7, maybe even some more that we're not seeing publicly. Recruits, guards in the 2025 class that Pitt's really hard on right now and going after. But at the same time, you can't get too invested because of the transfer portal. You get a guy like Damian Dunn. There's going to be guys like him available every year at this point and looking to find a new home. And transfers seem to love Pitt. We've seen it with Jamarius Burton, Nike Sabani, Greg Elliott, and Ellie Cummings. That era of the portal, the first real successful portal group for Pitt. And then we've got obviously Blake Hinson, the guys this past season as well. So before I get into these guys, I just want to caution you guys that I don't want to see a lot of panic when one of these guys doesn't come to Pitt or maybe drops down to top 5 and Pitt's not in there. But it's an exciting time. Like it's a really exciting time in the Pete. I know the coaching staff's excited about a lot of these kids. I talked to some guys around the program this past week at TBT, and there's a ton of excitement. We talked all about culture last week, the TBT happening with all the alumni in the building, Nike, Nelly, just great spokesmen for the program. But it's time to win. It's time to build this program up. It's time for the season. We've got Capel coming up on Thursday, talking to the media. We're getting ready. We're almost there. And for us basketball fans, we're pumped. So they've got 5 guys right now that they're looking at in their top schools list. Malik Thomas, we all know Malik around here, Pittsburgh kid, as well as Amari Evans. 2 guys from the area. Those are the top 2 names that I think people around here, even some casuals that don't follow recruiting too much, know about Malik and Amari. Malik's got a top 7 out, Amari a top 10. Then we've got Amari Witherspoon, who was the news today, including Pitt in his top 10. Interesting story there. Pitt offered him just a week ago, last Monday. And he had already had 6 or 7 visits scheduled for this upcoming fall and then decided to release his top 10, trim his recruitment really quick after getting some late offers here last week, one of which being Pitt. But he includes schools like Pitt, Clemson, Butler, Vanderbilt was in there, West Virginia, Virginia Tech, Xavier, George Mason, a mid-major program getting in that mix as well. He's a DMV kid. So we all know Pitt's been targeting the DMV for a lot of recruits over the past few years. You look at Ish Leggett, thriving, coming from the DMV to Pitt. So Amari Witherspoon, definitely a great option for Pitt. I'm really interested to see if he schedules a visit. The one visit that he had scheduled that didn't make his top 10 was James Madison. Don't know if he'll fill that weekend with a Pitt trip or trip somewhere else. So we will be looking forward to OMARI Witherspoon's recruitment. DAVION Hanna's another guy, 6'6" guard, who included Pitt along with a bunch of other high majors. He's got NC State, Louisville from the ACC, Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan State, Wisconsin, some Big Ten schools in there. Again, Xavier. And then CJ Ingram is that dual sport athlete who Narduzzi offered on the football side, had him out for a visit, I believe, a practice this past season for football, but looks like he's just playing basketball in college now. He's committed to basketball. CJ Ingram is a really exciting piece, 6'6" guard. Again, super athletic. He's a dual sport athlete in high school. Has a lot of big names after him: Pitt, Kansas, Michigan, Florida, Oklahoma, Mississippi State, Georgetown, the list goes on. So a lot of different schools that Pitt's competing with here. It's really interesting. Xavier is in 3 of the 5 lists. Kansas 2, Alabama, Mississippi State, Texas A&M, Vanderbilt, and Georgetown are all in 2 of the lists. So those schools, I mean, a lot of SEC, a lot of Southern schools. I guess it's all Georgetown's Big East, Kansas, Big 12. And then we've got 4 SEC schools at Xavier as well, Big East. But a lot of SEC competition here, which is interesting for Pitt. You know, you're not surprised when some kid drops a final list with Pitt, you know, West Virginia, Xavier, Cincinnati, Penn State, even Virginia Tech, Virginia. Those schools we see all the time. But when you see these schools like Vanderbilt and Texas A&M popping up in 2 of these lists that Pitt's competing with, it's really interesting. I think it benefits Pitt because it's a lot different, obviously, coming up to visit Pittsburgh than it is those Southern schools, which I haven't been personally to a lot of those SEC schools, but I know I can assume that Pitt's campus in the city looks a lot different than those SEC environments. So being different, being able to stand out on those visits is good. Capel's talked about it since COVID kind of slowed down, how it's been so important for kids to get on campus, for recruits to get on campus to see what Pittsburgh has to offer. They always seem to love it and rave about it in these interviews that we do with them. So really important for Pitt to win some of these recruiting battles, at least get the kids on campus, establish that relationship with them. So there you have it. We've got 5 players. Keep track of all of the PSN Pitt basketball recruiting news on our recruiting board on our site. I will link that down below. Thank you guys so much for tuning in.